When Heart to Heart was canceled, you were devastated, weren't you?
I was terribly upset. It was obviously an enormous part of my life.
Stefanie Powers, the name once inseparable from the elegance, sophistication, and sharp intelligence of Jennifer Hart in Hart to Heart, was among the brightest faces of American television in the late 20th century. With her striking red hair, warm gaze, and natural charm, she convinced millions of viewers that a woman could love deeply while standing strong against every challenge. Yet behind the glamour, her life carried chapters few could have imagined. Love ending in tragedy, 2 unfulfilled marriages, devastating losses within the span of a single month, and a life-or-death battle with cancer. What makes Stefanie's story especially compelling is not only her screen career, but the way she transformed wounds into strength to live and contribute. She once stood on the edge of despair, only to find another path forward. At 82, Stefanie Powers remains both an artistic icon and living proof of a woman's resilience to rise again after devastation. Her story inspires admiration for a Hollywood star, yet it also silences us with sorrow, draws empathy for her scars, and surprises with the extraordinary determination hidden beneath a fragile exterior. Perhaps that is why she is remembered, not only as Jennifer Hart of a golden era, but as a real person who lived, loved, suffered, and proudly overcame fate. Stefanie Powers was born on November 2nd, 1942, right in Hollywood, the very heart of American cinema. Yet her childhood bore little trace of glamour. Her birth name was Stefania Zofia Paul, and in her later memoir she admitted that her true family name was Federkiewicz, a distinctly Polish surname that Hollywood at the time would never have accepted. From the very beginning, fate placed Stefanie between 2 worlds. On one side, the humble roots of immigrant heritage. On the other, the harsh and prejudiced entertainment industry. Her parents divorced when she was young. In her memoir, she scarcely mentioned her father, except to admit that his presence brought only tension and unhappiness. Throughout her childhood, Stefanie was raised by her mother, Juliana Golan, a resilient Polish woman, and her brother, Jeffrey Julian Paul. When her mother passed away at the age of 96, Stefanie would later say she was the only person with whom she ever felt completely safe. She also had a half-sister, Diane, who died in 2000. Though she grew up in the middle of Hollywood, Stefanie's life was far from luxurious. Her childhood was defined by hours in ballet class, where her classmates included Natalie Wood and Jill Saint. John, girls who, like her, would go on to become film stars. It was there that young Stefania Zofia Paul first felt she belonged to the world of art. Ballet was both a passion and a refuge, helping her escape the void of an incomplete family. At Hollywood High School, Stefanie blossomed into a vibrant cheerleader. Among her friends at the time was Nancy Sinatra, daughter of the legendary Frank Sinatra. These seemingly chance connections hinted that Stefanie would never be just an ordinary girl. She was destined to orbit among the stars. Yet behind the confident gaze of that Polish-born teenager already lay a soul that knew too well the meaning of loss and loneliness. At 16, Stefania Zofia Paul officially stepped through Hollywood's gates when she signed a contract with Columbia Pictures. But to be recognized, she had to give up her Polish-rooted name, too foreign for America at the time. The studio forced her to change it to Stefanie Powers, a name shorter, more Anglo-Saxon, and easier to sell to television audiences. That change of name, seemingly small, became her first indelible mark. To survive, she had to erase part of her own identity. In her early career, Stefanie was only given supporting roles in films and television. Experiment in Terror, 1962. If a Man Answers, 1962. McClintock, 1963. And Palm Springs Weekend, 1963. She appeared as decorative beauty, sometimes the cute schoolgirl, sometimes the fleetingly alluring young woman, never once leaving a strong impression. Yet Stefanie pressed on with patience, knowing that in Hollywood, landing a worthy role could mean sacrificing an entire youth. Her first real break came in 1965 when she starred in the horror film Die, Die, My Darling, alongside the legendary Tallulah Bankhead. The movie wasn't a commercial hit, but it was unforgettable. Bankhead, famous for her eccentricity, left Stefanie both stunned and inspired. From her, the young actress learned that acting was not just about looks or lines, but about the power of personality and boldness. A year later, in 1966, Stefanie was cast as April Dancer in The Girl from UNCLE, a spin-off of The Man from UNCLE. It was a golden chance, a leading role in a trendy spy series, even landing her on the cover of TV Guide. With her slender, 117-pound frame and sharp eyes, Stefanie became television's new spy heroine. But expectations soon collapsed. The show was dismissed as lackluster, lasting just one season before cancellation. For Stefanie, it was a painful setback. She thought the door to stardom had opened, only to see it slam shut, leaving her empty and disheartened. Throughout the 1970s, Stefanie struggled with scattered guest roles. Kung Fu, 1974, The Rockford Files, 1975, The $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, 1976. She also appeared in a few mid-tier films like Escape to Athena, 1979. But the spotlight still eluded her. In a Hollywood shifting daily, simply staying afloat was an achievement, let alone shining. Stefanie later admitted this was the period when she had to learn resilience, for even the slightest surrender would have erased her name completely. Looking back, those failures became the foundation that forged Stefanie Powers' strength. Without those years of rejection, she might never have had the power to seize the role of destiny that would come later, Jennifer Hart. After years of being overlooked by Hollywood, Stefanie Powers had grown accustomed to supporting roles, to shows canceled too soon, to the spotlight never fully landing on her. The 1970s slipped by with barely a chance to shine. And yet, just when it seemed her career had closed, fate opened its greatest door. One name: Jennifer Hart. In 1979, Hart to Hart was born. At the time, few believed that a series about a wealthy couple traveling the world solving crimes could become a phenomenon. But Stefanie and Robert Wagner turned it into magic. They didn't just play Jonathan and Jennifer Hart, they lived them. On screen, audiences saw a love built on trust, a chemistry in every glance, every smile. Off-screen, the two spent 14 hours a day together for 5 years, without a single argument. Stefanie once said, "I will probably never again spend that much time with any man in my life, and he with any woman." We fit together in the strangest way. That harmony became the soul of Hart to Hart. In an era when American television leaned towards steamy scenes and sensational plots, Jonathan and Jennifer Hart offered something else. A love story, warm, witty, and glamorous. Viewers didn't just watch them solve cases, they watched to believe that love could be both tender and enduring, both passion and companionship. Success didn't come overnight, but when it hit, It swept in like a storm. In 1980, Heart to Heart won the People's Choice Award for Favorite New TV Drama. The roar of the crowd that night, Stefanie later recalled, was the moment she realized she had stepped out of obscurity and into the public's heart. From 1979 to 1984, Heart to Heart ran for 5 seasons, elevating Stefanie to the status of a global television icon. She received 2 Emmy nominations and 5 Golden Globe nominations. But the greatest reward was not trophies or titles. It was the millions of viewers who embraced her as a trusted friend, an ideal woman of her time. Heart to Heart didn't just define Stefanie Powers' career. It saved her from oblivion, lifted her from the brink to the summit, and left behind a Jennifer Hart forever alive in the memory of American television. Alongside the peak of her career, Stefanie Powers' private life unfolded as a series of promising beginnings that almost always ended in heartbreak. In 1966, in her early 20s, Stefanie married actor Gary Lockwood, a rising Hollywood figure who had gained attention for his role in 2001, A Space Odyssey. At that time, Stefanie was just reaching the threshold of fame, and to the public, their marriage looked like a perfect portrait. 2 young, vibrant artists walking hand in hand into the glitter of cinema. At first, the love gave Stefanie a sense of safety and sweetness. Amid the noise of film sets, auditions, and Hollywood's flashing lights, she had a home to return to. But the dream of marriage soon faced trials from the very world they both pursued. Gary Lockwood, ambitious and striving to make his mark, was not always willing to step aside and let the spotlight fall on Stefanie. Meanwhile, Stefanie, young and passionate, longed to break free from supporting roles and claim her place at the center. 2 people, 2 careers, 2 artistic egos, like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. The pressures of work, long shooting schedules, lavish parties, and Hollywood's endless temptations slowly pulled them apart. Arguments became constant, no longer trivial quarrels, but fractures that could not be mended. Deep down, Stefanie began to feel lonely in her own home, the place that should have been her sanctuary. After 6 years in 1972, the marriage ended in divorce. Stefanie walked away carrying more wounds than she let show. For her, it wasn't just the end of a relationship, but a wake-up call. Love in Hollywood could rarely walk side by side with fame. Her divorce from Gary Lockwood became the first milestone in a string of emotional losses that would follow. It planted in her a haunting belief that private happiness, no matter how brightly it begins, can dissolve into shadows under the weight of ambition and stardom. Stefanie Powers met William Holden at a time when she no longer believed in love. Her first marriage had just ended. She was still young, still beautiful, but inside was an emptiness her work could not fill. William Holden was different. Stefanie had never imagined she would fall for a man like him. He was nearly 20 years older, famous, an Oscar winner, once voted America's most beloved leading man. Yet the first time they met, Stefanie saw nothing of a star. What she saw was a quiet, lonely man, with eyes that looked as though they had just walked out of a long battle. No pretense, no mask, no need to win anyone over. And that was what disarmed her. She never knew exactly when the relationship began. There were no candlelit nights, no soundtrack in the background, just short conversations, glances that lingered. And then one day she realized she was already too much in love with William Holden. Holden was not gentle. He was not indulgent. Sometimes he wouldn't call for a week. Sometimes he would vanish, only to return with weary eyes and the breath of liquor in every word. Yet Stefanie endured and waited, because her love for him was greater than her hurt. She once said, "He was not good at love, but he needed me." And so she stayed, like a gatekeeper, like a shield between him and the darkness that was swallowing him. Alcohol was a part of Holden that Stefanie could never control. She tried everything: persuasion, anger, silence, leaving, coming back. But it always ended the same. Him sitting in that chair, glass in hand, as though it were the only thing keeping him alive. The pain wasn't in his drunkenness. It was in the shame that followed every time he sobered up. Stefanie never said it out loud, but deep inside grew a fear. She was loving a man who was slowly dying before her eyes. Their trips to Kenya were the rare times she saw him truly alive. Together, they ventured deep into wildlife reserves, slept in tents under the stars. There, they were no longer a film star and a screen legend, but just two people, trudging through mud, watching rhinos and elephant herds. Stefanie realized Holden was never happy on the red carpet, but he was alive in nature. And in that discovery, she found the greatest meaning of their love, not only to love, but to be led into a world larger than herself. She was both deeply in love and utterly powerless, a reluctant witness to the self-destruction of the man she considered her reason for living. On November 16, 1981, while Stefanie was at work, the news came. Holden was dead, alone in his apartment. A drunken fall, his head striking a table, blood pooling for hours before anyone found him. No one told her in time. No one called soon enough. He died exactly as she had feared most, quietly, alone, with no one by his side. She did not cry before the press. She did not speak on television. But friends said she went silent for days. She did not eat. She did not talk. She stared into nothing. And when she finally spoke, it was only one sentence. "I did not keep him." She could not keep him from drinking. She could not keep him from death. She could not keep him, despite giving nearly 10 years of her youth trying. In losing Holden, Stefanie lost the only person who had made her believe happiness was real. That love, though it ended in tragedy, became the deepest scar of her soul, a fire that burned bright and then consumed everything, leaving behind ashes nothing could replace. The first pain had barely passed when another struck without warning. If William Holden's death had already left Stefanie Powers shattered to the point of collapse, fate was even crueler when, just 17 days later, she was dealt another devastating blow. On November 29, 1981, Natalie Wood, the legendary film star, Stefanie's former ballet classmate and wife of Robert Wagner, drowned in mysterious circumstances aboard a yacht off Catalina Island. Natalie was only 43. The news shook Hollywood to its core, while Stefanie fell into near paralysis. In less than 3 weeks, she lost the two people closest to her. One, the great love of her life, the other a childhood friend who was also the wife of her dearest screen partner, Robert Wagner. The double tragedy almost broke her. She kept working, kept appearing before the public, but inside was nothing but emptiness. Losing William Holden meant losing her greatest source of strength. Losing Natalie Wood meant watching her close friend Wagner spiral into grief. In the midst of mourning, Stefanie and Wagner grew closer than ever. Struck by two shared shocks, they became each other's pillars, not lovers, but soulmates, walking through the darkness together. Audiences at the time still saw Stefanie Powers smiling as Jennifer Hart on television, still embodying the glamorous icon of American TV. Few realized that behind the camera, she was a woman grappling with two soul-crushing wounds at once. That single month of 1981 etched itself into her life's history like a storm, sweeping away her greatest love and a treasured friendship, leaving behind a void nothing could fill. Her bond with Robert Wagner after the losses of 1981 grew so strong that viewers struggled to distinguish where screen ended and life began. In Heart to Heart, they played the ideal couple, Jonathan and Jennifer Hart, loving, intuitive, perfectly in sync in every adventure. Off-screen, they spent 14 hours a day together for 5 years without a single argument or crack in their partnership. That closeness inevitably sparked rumors of a real romance. Headlines speculated, audiences whispered, many believed their on-screen love had crossed into reality. But both Stefanie and Wagner consistently denied it. She was blunt. "We are as close as brother and sister." For them, it was a soul-level friendship, one made even stronger by the shared grief of 1981. But the rumors didn't end there. Natalie Wood's mysterious death left Wagner under a cloud of suspicion. Many, including Natalie's sister, actress Lana Wood, publicly claimed Wagner was responsible. The media dug deep, painting him as a possible culprit in a case still unresolved to this day. Amid the storm of public scrutiny, Stefanie Powers did not stay silent. She chose to stand firmly by Wagner's side, openly defending him. She repeatedly emphasized that the accusations were nothing more than cheap grabs for attention, insisting her closest friend could never have been involved in such a tragedy. That loyalty earned her admiration for courage and devotion, but it also dragged her into controversy, with some accusing her of blind allegiance. During those years, Stefanie bore not only her personal grief, but also the weight of public suspicion and gossip. Yet perhaps that was what made her image all the more remarkable. Not only a woman who loved passionately, but one who stood unflinchingly by her friend in his darkest hour, no matter the doubt or criticism. After 2 consecutive deaths in 1981, Stefanie Powers stood at a crossroads. She could drown in grief, letting tragedy pull her into the abyss, or she could find a way to keep living. Stefanie chose the latter, to turn loss into action. In 1982, just a year after William Holden's death, Stefanie founded the William Holden Wildlife Foundation. For her, it was not just a wildlife conservation organization, it was a way to continue the love story with the man she called the greatest love of my life. Holden had been passionate about Africa's wilderness, especially Kenya, where he was deeply involved with the Mount Kenya Game Ranch and Wildlife Conservancy. After his passing, Stefanie took over as director, transforming it into the center of her life's work. She did not approach this as a token gesture. For decades, she traveled the globe, collaborating with international organizations, joining projects with the Cincinnati Zoo and the Atlanta Zoo, and appearing as a guest speaker at major conservation conferences. From film star, Stefanie reinvented herself as an international activist, steadfast, passionate, and deeply persuasive. Amid the lectures, she still carried the image of a Hollywood lady, but no longer to promote films. Instead, to advocate for the survival of endangered species. That image inspired admiration. A woman who had once captivated millions of viewers now stood in the heart of Kenya, speaking about elephants, rhinos, and the fragility of nature. By sustaining and expanding the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, Stefanie found a new purpose in life: If Heart to Heart had lifted her to the peak of fame, then Holden's legacy gave her a mission, a lifeline that kept her standing after an incomparable loss. For Stefanie, it was not only a tribute to the man she loved, but also her own way of surviving. It seemed fate always tested her with beautiful but unfinished loves, leaving her with more loss than fulfillment. Years later, when she thought she had found peace, Stefanie married French businessman Patrick de la Chenaie in 1993. At first, the relationship was expected to bring her a lasting family after years of solitude. Yet by 1999, they divorced, leaving Stefanie once again to walk away from marriage empty-handed. After 2 failed unions, Stefanie found a lasting love with Tom Carroll, a former Navy officer and auditor. For 14 years, he became her emotional anchor, the man who finally gave her the rare peace she longed for. She once admitted Tom Carroll was the man who made her feel truly loved after all the tragedies she had endured. But in 2014, Tom Carroll died, leaving Stefanie once again to face loneliness. That loss added another weight to the chain of grief Stefanie carried. In a rare moment of candor, she confessed, "Not being a mother is the greatest sadness of my life." Those words stripped away every layer of glamour, revealing a deeply wounded Stefanie, a woman who had once longed for children, but whose dream was forever left unfinished by the tide of fate and broken loves. Even so, Stefanie never allowed herself to collapse. She continued to live as a multifaceted artist, returning to the stage with love letters, The King and I, Looped, appearing in television work such as Deceptions, 1985, At Mother's Request, 1987, and most recently, The Artist's Wife, 2020. In 2003, she even released a jazz album, On the Same Page, revealing to audiences another side of Stefanie, her deep, emotive voice, far removed from the image of Jennifer Hart. Beyond the arts, she was also an accomplished polo player, once a member of the Royal Berkshire Polo Club, even competing in the British National Championships, the proud, commanding figure of a Hollywood lady on horseback. Looking back, broken romances, sudden deaths, and the sorrow of never having children became the complicated pieces of Stefanie Powers' life. But rather than let them bury her, she chose to turn it all into fuel, to keep living, to keep creating, and to keep defending the values she believed were worth fighting for. Just when it seemed that emotional loss had tested Stefanie Powers enough, fate cast her into another storm, this time a battle with illness. In 2007, Stefanie was diagnosed with breast cancer. She underwent surgery and successful treatment. But before she could breathe in relief, another blow struck just a year later: lung cancer. Having smoked for 20 years, Stefanie knew she was paying the price. Doctors told her the disease had spread. In that moment, she felt her life slipping through her fingers. In January 2009, Stefanie underwent surgery to remove part of her right lung. It was not only a risky operation, but also a brutal turning point. What followed were months of agonizing recovery, shortness of breath, lingering pain, constant fatigue. She once shared that some mornings she would wake and feel as if her body had no life left in it. But as in every other chapter of her life, Stefanie refused to surrender. She reminded herself, "I have to live, not only for myself, but for the legacy I have built." The William Holden Wildlife Foundation, the cause into which she had poured her heart, became the force pulling her back up each time exhaustion knocked her down. The physical pain was compounded by emotional loss. In 2009, While Stefanie was still recovering from lung surgery, her mother, Juliana Golan, the woman who had protected and raised her since childhood, died at age 96 from pneumonia. Stefanie lost the last anchor of her family. It was a time when she was nearly engulfed by darkness, fighting her own illness while mourning the loss of her beloved mother. In the years that followed, Stefanie appeared less frequently in public. She declined major events, choosing instead to perform occasionally in plays or deliver lectures on wildlife conservation. Each time she appeared, audiences could clearly see the marks of time and illness on her face, her voice, her bearing. Yet they also saw a pride that never faded, a Stefanie who still stood tall, still gave herself fully to her cause, and still carried eyes filled with resilience. In recent years, Stefanie has admitted that she relies on a special medication available to only 5% of lung cancer patients worldwide. Thanks to it, her health has remained relatively stable, though never fully restored. She has shared that she does not seek pity. She simply wants people to see that even at 80, after weathering countless storms, she still refuses to surrender to fate. Today, Stefanie Powers divides her time between California and Kenya, continuing to oversee the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, performing on stage when possible, and serving as an inspirational speaker at international conferences. She is no longer the dazzling star that Jennifer Hart once was, but she has become something deeper, a symbol of strength, loyalty, and the will to live. Looking back on Stefanie Powers' journey, one realizes she has left behind not only an admirable film and television career, but also a dual legacy, one artistic, the other deeply human. In the realm of art, Stefanie will forever be remembered as Jennifer Hart of Heart to Heart. That image transcended the confines of a 1980s television series to become a cultural icon, a woman who was alluring, intelligent, and proud. Her Emmy and Golden Globe nominations and her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, 1992, stand as official recognitions. Yet what mattered more was the affection audiences continued to hold for her decades after the series ended. Stefanie also proved her versatility by constantly challenging herself. From acclaimed miniseries such as Mistral's Daughter, 1984, Deceptions, 1985, and At Mother's Request, 1987, to Broadway and West End stages with Love Letters, The King and I, Looped. In 2003, she even released the jazz album On the Same Page, showcasing a warm, nuanced singing voice. She never allowed herself to be confined to a single role, always expanding the breadth of her artistry. But if her career made her a star, the decades she devoted to the William Holden Wildlife Foundation turned her into a humanitarian figure of global stature. For over 40 years, she traveled between the U.S. and Kenya, advocating for wildlife conservation, collaborating with major zoos, and emerging as an international speaker of inspiration. Well into her 70s, while many of her peers had retired, Stefanie still appeared on stage, not to act, but to speak about elephants, rhinos, and vanishing forests. She was honored with the Sarah Siddons Award, 1993, for stage work, the Steiger Award, 2011, in Germany for artistic achievement, and the Broken Glass Award, 2017, from Palm Springs Women in Film and Television for breaking the glass ceilings that held women back in entertainment and the arts. These accolades recognized not just an actress, but a woman who dared to walk her own path. Today, Stefanie Powers is remembered not merely as a Hollywood star, but as a symbol of resilience. A woman who lived fully in love, was crushed by loss, yet stood again to transform tragedy into legacy. A star may age, but the fire of character and loyalty embodied by Stefanie will endure. The life of Stefanie Powers reads like a novel of tragedy and resilience. From little Stefania Zofia Paul, a child scarred by a broken home, to Jennifer Hart, the television star who captivated millions. From a forgotten actress lost in failed roles, she rose to become a global TV icon. From a woman abandoned by tragedy, she transformed into an international conservationist, carrying William Holden's legacy to keep the fires of Kenya's wilderness alive. Through heartbreak and loss, Stefanie Powers turned tragedy into action, pain into legacy, through sheer resilience and pride. Today, in her 80s, she is no longer the screen queen of the 1980s, but she endures as a warm flame, on stage, in music, in conservation projects, and in the memories of her audience. She is living proof that true radiance does not lie in fame, but in how one survives life's fiercest storms. Perhaps what inspires people about Stefanie Powers is not only her talent or beauty, but her courage to rise after every fall. After hearing her life story, one cannot help but realize that life can be merciless, taking away love, health, even the dream of motherhood. But it can never take away pride and the will to live if one knows how to turn pain into strength. And now, looking back at Stefanie Powers, a woman who loved fiercely, lost profoundly, and fought unrelentingly, we see not just a Hollywood star, but a real human being, intimate and deeply moving. What do you think? If you were Stefanie, standing between loss and hope, would you surrender or walk forward with pride? Share your thoughts with us to continue the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next inspiring stories about the turbulent lives of the Hollywood legends you love.